Good morning. If you don't know me, my name's Dan Cohen. I'm the Whitaker Executive Director and Professor of Entrepreneurship at Wake Forest, and I am thrilled to be with you this morning because we have a very special group of people that are super busy, and they've carved time out of their very, very busy lives to be with us today. And this is such a busy time for Coach Clawson right now. He's got his spring game tomorrow. He's got a bunch of alums that have come back to campus. He's going to have a special dinner tonight for his players to network and meet with alums that have been really successful in their fields. And so we would be appreciative to him at any moment because he's got so much on his plate. But can we please give a warm thanks and welcome to Coach Dave Clawson. And we are joined by two former Wake Forest greats on the football field that have evolved into top shelf business people and entrepreneurs. And so please join me in welcoming Cam Serenier and Brandon Lloyd. Okay. Coach, I'm going to start with you first, if you don't mind. You've had a remarkable coaching career. You were the youngest head coach ever at 31, and when you got the job at Fordham, and you've won big every single stop along the way. What would you tell your 31-year-old self now, if you could go back in time? What are some key lessons that you've learned along the way that you wish you would have known when you were a 31-year-old head coach?
We don't have enough time to cover that. So I was 31 years old when I got hired to be the head coach at Fordham University in the Bronx. And at the time, I was the youngest Division I head coach in the country. And I had been the offensive coordinator at Villanova, and we had scored a lot of points. And I had players like Brian Westbrook and Brian Finneran and all these guys that had long NFL careers at 1AA Villanova. And so I called some awful plays that went for 40 and 50 yards because the talent overcame the coaching. And then when I got to Fordham, I was young and thought I knew it all. And I did such a great job my first year at Fordham and did such a masterful job planning and game planning and hiring a staff that our football team that year went 0-11. We didn't win one game. And you take the whole approach of a growth mindset that I think a lot of times you learn way more in failure than you do in success. And when you're 0-11, there's a resounding thud. There's nobody in the building that can say, hey, I did my job. And it really forced us to look at every little thing we did, from how are we recruiting, how are we teaching a down block, what are we doing? We're not doing anything right. And it's incredibly humbling. And I was driving the car 120 miles an hour and working 16 hours a day, but I wasn't keeping the car on the road. And so, you go back and you say, really, what are your core values? What are the things that you're going to hang your hat on? At the end of the day, whether you win or lose, whether you get fired or whatever, at least go to bed at night saying that you stuck to your core value system. And I think the biggest thing that I learned that year is, okay, what are going to be our core values? And then what things do you have to have flexibility with? And I would say over my 24 years of being a head coach at 4 different schools, we have core values in terms of the accountability, the discipline, integrity, those type of things. Now, everything else is flexible. I've run 6 different defensive systems. I've run 8 different offenses. We've thrown the ball, ran the ball. There has to be flexibility with everything you do because you have to adjust to your personnel. I've never worked at a have. I've never worked at an Ohio State or an Alabama that you draft. I've been at places that you do have some competitive advantages, but you have to maximize what those competitive advantages are. And so if I'd go back, I would say from the very get-go, identify what your core values are, and whether you win or lose, don't abandon those core values, because the second you do that, you're going to fail.
That's well said. Entrepreneurs face 0-11 seasons in the beginning, right? They face a lot of adversity and failure, and they have to learn how to bounce back and cope with it. How did you keep your confidence up? It's your first job. You're the youngest coach, and then you probably didn't envision an 0-11 season. How did you keep your confidence up during that time?
I mean, if you're honest, you don't, but you have to hide it. And, there's a job to do, and you got to show up every day. The entire staff and players are looking at you, and if there's one time that you show a crack in the armor, then they have reason to not believe. And that's where, leadership can be a really lonely job. But everywhere I've been, I've always had a handful of mentors outside my organization that I can go to with advice, because their only goal is to help me. They're not, even on your own staff and the people that work for you, you're constantly making decisions of who's going to get promoted, who's going to get a raise. You have too much of an impact on their life for them to be completely transparent and honest with you. And so I think it's really important that you find a handful of people, mentors, that you can be transparent with, and in turn, they can be honest with you and tell you things you may not want to hear, but you know that their motivation is only to help you.
That makes great sense. Brandon, I have a question for you. You have been quoted as saying, "You are the company you keep." Can you expand on that and tell us a little bit about what that means to you personally?
Yeah, I think as humans, we're adaptable, right? We adapt to our surroundings. So just being in the right rooms with the right people, and it doesn't have to be people more successful than you or people that have more money than you, just surrounding yourself with good company, people like Cam Serenay who challenge you and make you think a little different, or motivate you, or Coach Clawson and his staff that he puts around that makes you want to be better, even though you thought you were already at your best, right? And so just challenging each other, having that energy around each other, I think is huge, especially for individuals who want to grow in their practice, whatever that is. So having the opportunity to talk to Cam 2 years after graduation, and he's about to start VQuip, and he's saying things on the phone, I'm like, I need to Google what he's talking about, right? Because I don't understand, but I'm nodding my head. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good, And I'm like, yeah, I got to Google that. Because he's using words, he's saying things that I have no idea about, but it's challenging me. Even though he's not doing that, to belittle me, he's just talking, and that's his, terms and speech. But being able to just grow from people, learn from people, I think just being adaptable and always learning.
That's fantastic. And so you both have tried your hand in professional football, a very, very competitive environment. One of the things that's always interested me about football, and I'd actually like to ask this question to both of you, you can't pick an industry where on paper the companies are more even. Every team has 53 players. I would imagine if you did any kind of measurement, if you measured the height of all the players, the weight of all the players, how fast they can run a 40-yard dash on average, how much weight they can bench press, right? I would think that these teams on paper are very close to being identical. So why are some teams so good and some teams really struggle to win over time?
Yeah, I think one big thing is just the culture, right? And kind of what that building is like. Even taking it, for example, with Wake Forest. When I first got here, I was 3-9, 4-8, 3-9. And then my last 2 years, I was 3-9 as well, but now they haven't missed a bowl game. So it's the culture. It starts from that. You go into a Jacksonville Jaguars or, any other low-performing team at the moment, and it's, why are they got the Evan Ingrams of the world. They got the Trevor Lawrences of the world. Why are they not winning when this quarterback is 5 rounds drafted lower than Trevor, right? And then you start to realize it's the culture. But it also goes back to what you just said, is the company you keep. Who's the leaders? Who's in there pushing guys? Who's in there setting the examples and letting them know this is the standard? So I think first is the culture, and then two, not every athlete's built the same. And what I mean by that is mindset. I was fortunate a lot of turmoil throughout my athletic journey, first going under recruited and getting offered to Wake Forest University 5 days before signing day, right? I was about to go to App State. A linebacker decommitted from Georgia Tech on a Friday or a Thursday. They came to my school Friday, did an unofficial visit that weekend, and then signed 3 days later on a Wednesday. And then going undrafted, right? Being first team All-ACC, fifth in tackling efficiency that year out of the NCAA, going undrafted, tearing my ACL my second year in the league. Like all this turmoil, it built up this underdog, this grit, this chip on my shoulder that has me built a different way. Same with Cam. Cam, comes from Virginia and does what he does in high school, comes to Wake Forest, still has to prove himself, breaks every record, still has to prove himself, doesn't get the respect he deserves in the NFL, and still has to make a way for himself. So I think not every athlete's built the same as well. So you might have a guy who on paper, 4'5", bench press 315, they both jump the same height, right? But that guy went through things and he's learned from them, and it's built up a chip or built up a motor inside him or fire that inside him that's different from this guy who was a 5-star, who, like Coach Clawson said, he went to the halves, right? Like they were drafted, not having to scrap and really put up things to make themselves presentable to coaches, and then, has a great career, right? So it's just finding the culture, the mindset of people, and really, really digging into that.
Thank you. That's
just well said. Yeah.
Yeah, Cam.
I don't think you could say it better than that. I think it comes down to the fundamentals, right? Is when talent is equal, all things else are controlled and kind of in a controlled environment, all the little things matter that much more. And I think the NFL is a really interesting case study around if you had equal talent, like you said, equal circumstance, equal funding, who wins, right? And it comes down to who does those little things right. And I think Brandon touched on something that's, this day is what sticks with me the most is when I got to Wake, I was Coach Clawson's first. I think Coach Clawson got here my freshman fall. So I committed under Grobe's staff, show up, coaching turnover. Chubb was already a leader on the team. He's a couple years older than me. And, there was this whole mindset of culture shift, right? And getting to watch a master class of how you take a 3-9 football team that has talent, right? And turn it into a perennial bowl time winner. And it all came down to building that culture. And, guys like Chubb and Garside, who's not here, and Hunter Williams, and there's all these older guys that basically were the cornerstones of that foundation getting set that didn't actually even get to see the bowl games that we're now in and winning. And I think it's so interesting to watch how big of a difference that makes, regardless of talent, is those fundamentals.
So it sounds like culture is a big part of it. And Coach, back to you, I know we've had some conversations and you've told me some thoughts on culture. You have, I think, a particularly daunting challenge with culture because every year you have a big chunk of your team graduate and move on in life. And then now with things that are changing in the environment with transfer portal, you can probably count on a pretty good amount of your roster turning over in a given year. Can you speak a bit about how you've been able to sustain such a strong culture? Because that also connects to entrepreneurship, where companies are growing very fast and they're adding people very quickly, and they may not be as bought in as the people that were there from the very beginning, that went through the really brutal early days. And so sustaining culture, challenging in entrepreneurship as well. Love to hear your insights on that.
Well, I think it's funny listening to Cam and Brandon here talk about the change in culture, because if there was a transfer portal back then, both their asses would have left here my first semester.
Okay.
Right? You guys would, they would have been in the portal.
Tell us more.
So it's a few things. I think got here, I just think it's human nature, right? When people aren't having success, they pull away from each other, and when people are having success, it bonds them. And so we were not going to be a good football team the first 2 years. I've coached football for 35 years. When I got here, our first mat drill, I'm like, thank God I have a 5-year contract, because we're not going to be good. So at first, you kind of send the message to the team in recruiting that, okay, these are the things that we expect from a Wake Forest football player, and anybody who's ever played for me can repeat those 3 things. That if you love football, if you're going to go to class and you're not a dope smoker, we would love you to be in our program because your value system will fit our value system. Okay? If you don't love football, if you're not going to go to class and you love to smoke weed, I have 3 institutions that are about an hour and a half down the road I'd love you to go to. And so it's then reinforcing those messages, and our whole thing was we weren't going to be good, so how do we find a way to reward the achievers? The reward wasn't going to come in winning games, and so every time a player got a GPA of over a 3.0, we celebrated them. Anytime they made a strength gain from 1,000 to 11 to 1,200 pounds, we celebrated them. We'd get beat in a game by 14 points, and the first thing I would show in the Sunday meeting are the 10 to 15 clips that were examples of winning football and trying to encourage people. And so that went away towards, again, the value system of right now, our competition isn't Duke, it's not North Carolina, it's not NC State. It's for the hearts and minds and time commitment of our players. And if they come to the locker room every day and it's not a rewarding, enjoyable experience, that their interest levels are going to go to other places, especially at Wake Forest, that we have smart people who have many talents that can apply their talents in other places. And so much of it was building a locker room that we had a healthy culture, that the players were playing with people that had shared value systems. And I think that's the biggest thing that we've done in recruiting is we don't get the highest ranked recruits, but you sell your strengths. And our strengths at Wake Forest are it's a great academic institution, we get smart players, and then what value are we adding to their lives, right? Because it's got to be more than just transactional football. If it's only about football, there's a million other places they can go to. So in what ways are we contributing to their lives and adding value to it that's unique to Wake Forest? So one of the things that we do here is we have what we call a leadership development program. And I've done this every year the past 20 years. Every time a head coach has success at the end of the year and he's on that microphone with ESPN, and why were you good this year? Well, coach, we just had great leadership. And it's almost the cliche that when the team then fails, that they'll talk about their lack of leadership. And so if leadership is so important, then why would you leave that to chance? And so every year that we do a book study in our football program, and we have a leadership committee of 20 guys, that these are the 20 players that help establish and reinforce your culture on a daily basis. And they become kind of the go-between between the coaches and the players. And we have a couple players here today that are on that leadership committee. And I steal from the business community. The books that I've used are Good to Great, Grit, Mindset. We're studying a Ryan Holiday book now. But I take books from outside the realm of sports, and we try to teach concepts of leadership. And people have this vision that the leader is a General Patton or a Lee Iacocca that's loud and bold. And then when you get to Good and Great, the whole model of what a level 5 leader is, and mentor and servant leadership, and then you hope that that kind of just resonates throughout your program so that when a class graduates, the culture doesn't graduate with it.
Great, thank you for that. Brandon Chubb mentioned a couple minutes ago about the kind of chip on the shoulder that you get from continuously performing at a high level, but yet people are always questioning you when you try to get to the next level, right? And so you had a great college career, and then it's tough when you make that transition to the NFL. And he mentioned chip on the shoulder, he mentioned grit. As a coach, those are things, how do you look for that when you're recruiting people to join your team? That I would think that as a football coach, you'd want people with grit and tenacity and a chip on their shoulder. How do you look for that or find that in a young player?
I think a lot of it is just finding people that have undergone adversity and figured a way out. We always say that successful people have routines. So what is your routine? Do you have the discipline to stick with it? Do you have the smarts and the flexibility when something happens that upsets your routine? And quite honestly, we recruit a lot of players here that come here with a chip on their shoulder because they weren't offered by a lot of the schools we played. I mean, two of the very, very best players in our whole football program right now are Keyshawn Williams and Taylor Marin. And if they're honest, Taylor was probably going to go to Dartmouth if we didn't offer him. And Keyshawn's best offer was Kent State. But when you watch these guys on film, when you watch them compete in person, I mean, they were focused, they had an edge, they were purposeful, they were intentional, and those are the guys that you win with. They're two of the best players in the ACC right now. We wouldn't have won the games we've won the past 2 years without them. But we also design an offense that maximizes their skill set and minimizes the things that maybe they don't do as well. So in our offense, they're the two best slots in the country. But people didn't recruit them because they're not 6'4", 6'5". So we don't ask them to do things that other teams would ask a 6'4", 6'5" receiver to do. But they can make you miss in a phone booth, which like people who understand that are the people older than 50. So
I had to show my children a phone booth in London. They're like, "What's that box thing over there?" They're both budding entrepreneurs too, and really good ones too. So, question for Brandon and for Cam: can you think of a situation where you were stressed, right, in business? You're stressed in your life with what's happening, trying to grow businesses and just encounter real adversity and challenges. Can you think of situations and you drew on your foundation as a football player under Coach Clawson at Wake that kind of helped guide you through those difficult times?
Yeah, every single day. Yeah, it's like I don't think every day is a battle, right? And I think it's the fundamentals that I learned. I think I didn't appreciate it until being removed from it. I think even is when we're in the thick of it. You're so focused on football. You're young. You're learning. You're soaking it all in, but you're not like digesting. And I think once I left into the professional world and kind of got more on the business side and started my business and got into where every day is a new setback, you got to figure your way through, right? You lean on these principles, and what gave me comfort was starting to feel those same feelings of uncomfortability or of doubt or fear that you felt as a young freshman coming into a football program, right? Where everyone's bigger than you, everyone's faster than you, everyone's stronger than you, but you can, feel comfort knowing that your work ethic, that, the fundamentals that coach teaches us and the team teaches you and football teaches you will breed success, whether it's football or business. And I think that's what really helps settle me back in.
Yeah, when I first came to Wake, I made a position switch from staying up defense end in high school to middle linebacker. So I redshirted my first year. And then, going into year 2, going into year 3, I realized what it was. It was, we're probably not going to win, but as long as I handle my business on the field, I check the box, right? As long as I get the tackles, as long as I play good on defense, regardless if we go to a bowl or not. And that's kind of routine I got in. And then when Coach Clawson comes, the culture changes. You talk about culture changes. Everything is to get the program to be where it is today, to buy in, sacrifice, all these things, and really changing your mindset, right? We talk about deacon time. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but Coach Clawson came in and said, deacon time. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So if a meeting starts at 10 and you're not there at 9:45, the last guy that walks in the room is late. I remember he made an example. He said, hey, guys, we're going to spring break, but we have a meeting Sunday. It was either a Sunday or a Monday. He's like, if you're late, we start mat drills that Monday. If you're late, you will sit in the middle and watch the rest of the team do it. A guy came 1 minute late, sat in the middle of the 50-yard line while we did mat drills at probably 5 in the morning, 32 degrees. Guys' fingers are falling off. And I think Coach Clawson actually bought him a coffee while he was sitting in the middle. But those things, punctuality is a real big thing for me now, right? And things like that I take into my life now, even in business with Captain Partners and finding budding entrepreneurs and teams like Cam has assembled, is understanding those intangibles in those founders. Because that's important, right? Cam's going to get all the no's and go through all the ups and downs. People are going to tell him how bad his idea is, and then one day they're going to tell him how great of an innovator he is, right? And at the same time, with markets and black swan events like COVID, things happen, right? But being able to be resilient, adaptable, have aptitude to just go figure that out, right? Just go figure it out. Because sometimes you just don't have a playbook if you're starting something and you're novel with the idea that you're creating. So all those foundations and principles lead me to where I'm at today, right? Staying hungry, getting guys to buy in, leading from the front. I remember with leadership, getting guys to buy in, right? Thirsty Thursdays. We had Thirsty Thursdays, we would go to Last Resort. And we would have a practice Friday, right? And then play Saturday. Or if we were in the spring, we would have workouts 6 a.m. in the morning Friday and then a spring scrimmage on Saturday. And one of the things Clawson was saying was, no guys go out on Thursday. That's easy to say if you're a leader. Hey guys, you heard coach, don't go out. But it's even bigger if they don't see you out. And so, making examples like that of leading from the front, leading by example, sacrificing your experiences for the greater good of this team. Because I know I got guys like Cam who are 2-3 years younger than me. I know I got red shirts like Jesse Bates and guys like that who are watching me, regardless if they're saying it or not. And so just being able to use that in life as well and find innovating founders who have those intangibles, find people you assemble in your team who have those intangibles. Cam does it great with VQuip. I mean, his whole starting five is former Wake Forest athletes. So he's figured it out. We were just talking earlier. He's like, Clawson, I want your best guys. I want the Taylors and the Keishans of the world, right? So all that, you take from that foundation and really build upon it.
Fantastic. A specific question to you, Brandon, about playing linebacker, because you play linebacker, you're off the ball a little bit. You can see a bit about what's going on. What did you learn specifically from playing that position that translates into business or entrepreneurial success?
I think the biggest thing is just being a great communicator, especially as an athlete. Like, communication is key. When we're talking college, we got 125 guys in that locker room. I got to be able to talk to the kicker the same way I talk to the tight end, the same way I talk to the O-lineman, and I don't spend any time in a room with those guys, right? So I got to have those relationships. But then also, even at the NFL level, they don't call plays from the sideline with hand signals. Now you have a mic or a speaker in your helmet, so everybody's waiting on you to deliver that call. And not only that, now you got to tell the D-line, hey, this is your shift, or this is your adjustment pre-snap. Now the DBs are feeding off of you. And so it's just communicating with 10 other guys in a split of 25, 30 seconds, and then being able to know what you got to do, perform, and still excel at that as well. So I think at linebacker, the biggest thing was just communication. And then just also the way linebacker is played to be, in my opinion, a great linebacker and to do it efficiently, or effectively, you got to also know everybody else's position. Like how I would know what I had to do is knowing what the D-line in front of me had to do. If they're stunting A-gap, I know my position is not A-gap on this play. Whatever it is, it's going to be B, C, right? If I know the safeties are man-to-man, they're covering the tight end running back, well, I know I'm man-free, or I can hug rush, right? Or I go blitz the quarterback or spy the quarterback. So just knowing everybody around you and kind of understanding what your team has and their assignments so that you can feed off of it and help you be a better communicator, be more productive, whatever that is as well.
Fantastic. Cam, when you came to speak in our speaker series, which again, we really appreciate your time, you said something to me that stuck with me. And without naming names, there was a blue chip VC firm that was interested in and not surprisingly, in your fast growing startup. They were interested in making a major investment. This is a VC firm that a lot of entrepreneurs would give their eye teeth to get a meeting with and pitch, right? And they wanted to kind of dictate a bit about how you operated your business, and you just said it was a hard no. I don't think many people would do that. Tell me a bit about yourself. Tell me why you felt so comfortable turning down or moving away from that blue chip VC firm.
Yeah, I think it's, that chip on your shoulder can be a good and bad thing, sometimes. So it's, you always have to measure it, right? Is where are you being, pride can be a horrible principle, but it can also be something that, you have your teammates' backs, right? And I think being at Wake, you get used to everyone outside of the building having a viewpoint on certain things, with maybe it be your teammates, or maybe it be the coaching staff, maybe it be the performance on the field. But knowing that the folks inside the building know the best, right, is something that I always took to heart as a principle. And so even now in my own company, it's knowing that I know what my teammates are, I know how they perform, I know if they can fit the job or fit our need as a company to achieve our goals. Now, if they're not doing that, it's a different story, right? Then it comes down to a performance thing. But if they are, and someone else, just because you're a big name does not mean I'm going to change my philosophy.
That's fantastic. Follow-up question: since you need to be a tight end to get a job at VQuip, that's the way in there. No, but seriously, you're you're working with and you're bringing in people that you're close with, right? These are your friends, these are your former teammates, but you're the leader, right? Have you ever had to have tough conversations or hard conversations, and how do you handle that when you're talking to people that you're really close to?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think first off, you shouldn't hire someone you can't have a tough conversation with, right? I think that's my first principle is you hear warnings about don't do business with, family and friends and things like that, and I completely understand the principle. But if the relationship is right, meaning that you can have those conversations, you can have that dynamic between you, I think it's a hack for growth and a hack for buy-in on the company. I mean, I think these are the people that care so much about what we're doing. They care about each other, which allows you to go further. And that's the same thing in football, right? When you see the culture and the locker room dynamic and the cohesion between the team, that drives results, right? And I feel the same way in business, and it's something that's really important to me.
Great, thank you for that. Coach, we had a conversation, and it really stuck with me, and it was the amount of work that you put in to recruit the right type of Demon Deacon, right? The right type of Wake Forest football player. Could you share with the group a bit about some of the legwork that you do to make sure that you're bringing in young people that fit the mold you're looking for in your players?
Yeah, we have a multi-tiered evaluation process that we go through. And so when we sign 20 players on a signing date, that process usually started 2.5 to 3 years before that, and it started with a database of 12,000 players. And so we have coaches that are responsible for areas, and the coach that's responsible for an area is responsible to do the initial talent evaluation. There's got to be a certain talent level that we can win with the ACC. Like, they don't give football coaches tenure. So it's nice to save the world, but we need to win. And so we've got to recruit players that we can win in the ACC with. That area coach is responsible for the academic evaluation. And it's not just what are their grades, but is this someone who goes to class, doesn't have absences, that if you talk to the English teacher, the guidance counselor, the janitor, is this somebody that is committed to graduating and is going to go to class and is accountable? And then they're also responsible for the character evaluation piece, which a lot of times the high school coach or the English teacher won't share, but the visiting coach will. Hey, by the way, I heard that young man got in a fight, that I heard that he stole something here. We don't want to bring problems to Wake Forest University. This school is so small. We're the smallest Power 5 school in the country. You cannot hide bad character people here. They stick out like sore thumbs. Because if we can bring a great player who doesn't fit the school academically or doesn't fit here character-wise, they're going to turn around and leave. And I'd rather not get them than have them come here and leave. So right now, our graduation rate in our football program is 96%. So the reason we've had success is most of the players we recruit do stay and develop and become very good football players. And then I put responsibility on the position coach and the coordinator, that if it's a wide receiver, like for Taylor Marin and Keyshawn, Kevin Higgins, our receiver coach would evaluate them, and I tell the receiver coach, don't recruit them unless you want them in your room every single day. I want these to be young men that you look forward to meeting with, that they're going to add to our culture. If you have a super talented young man who's a pain in the neck, if we play against him, he'll beat us one day a year. If we recruit him into our program, he'll beat us down 365 days a year. So I would rather not take a talented player who doesn't fit our culture, because he'll end up hurting us more in the long run than helping us. And then finally, I tell the coordinators that you have veto power. I'm not going to ask you to coach an offense or coach a defense or coach a special teams unit of people that you didn't want. And so by the time we do the initial evaluation, at Wake Forest, and coaches used to joke, most people recruit from an ocean. We recruit from a puddle. That when you start looking at who's talented enough to play here, who fits the school academically, and then who fits our program from a character standpoint, there's not that many people. And then we make this concerted effort to go hard after the guys that we think fit. And we don't care who else is recruiting them. I think one of the worst things you can do is hide behind other people's evaluations. You don't offer somebody a job because they have 6 other job offers. You offer somebody a job because you truly want them in your organization. And so at Wake Forest, they have all these recruiting rankings in college football. So Rivals, 247, you have all these know-it-all wannabe coaches who internet evaluate players. In the last 7 years at Wake Forest, in the 14-league ACC, does anyone want to guess what our recruiting rankings are out of 14 schools? I wish. We're 14th. We're dead last. And yet, miraculously, in those 7 years, we've won the second most games in the ACC. We have the second longest bowl streak in the ACC. We've had the third most all-conference players. And so our thing is trust your own eyes, trust your own judgment. You know, don't defer responsibility because 8 other schools wanted them. And so, you know, there's a player a few years ago that was a 4-star, 5-star athlete. His cousin was at Wake Forest. He wanted to come here, and we spent a day with him, and we said, this guy doesn't fit. So we stopped recruiting him. Now he went to an SEC school. He was an all-SEC player. He's now in the NFL. He's a second-round draft pick, and we have 0 regrets about not recruiting him because he would not have fit our culture. And he ended up making the best decision for him, and we ended up making the best decision for Wake Forest. So, you know, the discipline, the accountability, all those things that are required to succeed here as a typical student is also similar for our program.
Fantastic. I would like to give the audience an opportunity to ask Coach or Brandon or Cam some questions. Would you like to do that? Cool. So here's the ground rules. One is we don't have you mic'd up, so I'm going to ask you to project your questions. And number 2, I would just like you to ask to, you know, direct your question to someone in particular. So with that, Melissa?
I would just like to hear a little bit about the businesses and what they are, what they do.
Yeah, we're an insurance technology company, so really fun, right? That focuses in the vacation rental market, so like the shared economy of people that rent types of vacation products. We help manage risks, transfer risk, and sell insurance through those technology.
And we're a venture capital firm, so we just find founders, early stage, seed stage companies, sports health tech, and just invest in them.
Other questions? Yes, Arthur.
Yeah, for Cam and Brandon, I know playing sports in college and professional level is a grind. Like you're up at 4:30 for 5 a.m. workouts, and then on the entrepreneurial side, it's a grind. I'm curious, similarities, differences, stories you guys have.
Yeah, I think from my side, the biggest difference between sports and business is a more of a marathon, right? And I think too with sports, you got used to like, you go out and play a really good game, you have a great play, instant. Like boom, someone's saying great catch, you get high grade on your game film, you know, people on Twitter saying great game, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think in business, nobody sees it, right? It's behind the shadows, you're grinding for years, and then all of a sudden you're an overnight success, right? That's kind of like the way I think I feel more so with business, and you know, and there's never really an end. You're always building and growing and growing. And I think learning to what football also taught me, and Coach Clawson actually was huge for me with this, is how do you enjoy the journey, right? Is something I've been focused on a lot because it's very easy to be destination focused, and in business, if you're destination focused, you're going to be a miserable person. So it's like you got to enjoy the journey, enjoy every day, enjoy that grind, and I think football helped me transition into that as well.
And that's a great point. I would just add to that. I think sports is more structured, right? So even though we woke up at 4:30 and didn't go to bed till 6, Coach Clawson would have a plan, a schedule, 3 months, your whole summer's planned out. So at least I knew exactly what I was doing, when I was doing it, how I was going to do it, so I could prepare for it. I think business is just more up and down, right? Anything can happen. Something that's going great could easily be sidetracked by something that's out of your control. So I would think those are the two big differences as well.
First of all, thank you for your insights and Cameron for your dedication about your experience I just want to ask you this is a direct question at my person, but I don't really have one question for this. If you had anything to say or to direct at all women and watching your see that whole like book in detail about their strength, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think, in my team, some of my highest performers are women. I think that was the question, right? And I see like it's a takeover, I think, and there's more equal footing. And I think, such talented folks are everywhere. And I think the same principles we're talking about today apply no matter what gender you are. I think it's all the same, right? The fundamentals transcend any kind of box for anybody. And I think that's something that is proven so true to me. It's who can take the little things and do them perfect every single day, no matter what. If you can focus on that and block out the noise around you, the rest takes care of itself.
I'm curious what your majors were in college. When you graduated, did you work? Did you go right into becoming an entrepreneur? How did you determine that that was the niche that you were to go into?
My major was economics. After graduating in 2015, I went to the NFL for 4 years. And in that time, I tore my ACLs, second year in the league. And I got to rehab at home in Atlanta at Emory. And so what that allowed me to do was meet guys like Mitch Shaw and other Wake Forest alums, a lot of Wake Forest alums in Atlanta, and really network and build an interest and curiosity about other things outside of sports. I also interned a lot with the NFL Players Association in the off seasons to build programs just around my interests so I can find out what I like and don't like. So whenever I am done, I don't have to take 2-3 years to figure that out. I can kind of jump into that. And so that experience got my wheels spinning early, especially with my Wake Forest background. I kind of got jealous. I was like, dang, I didn't really take as much advantage of it at Wake Forest as I should have, right? All these great people, this entrepreneurship program. So I really was thirsting for that knowledge and trying to get that back and make up time on that end. And so that got my wheels spinning and realized I had the entrepreneur ability and innate ability inside me. And so I just tried to find ways to bring that out.
Yeah, I was a finance major here at Wake. Graduated in, I think, technically the winter, December, but did a fifth year. Did basically chase the NFL for a year and a half, bottom roster type of thing. And then, when that dream ended, I was sitting there. I was like, you know what? You have no skills. You got to go figure something out outside of football. So I got my pinky toe in the door with a private equity firm in Charlotte called Ridgemont Equity Partners. They were gracious enough to get me an opportunity, even though I probably didn't deserve it at the time. Worked my butt off there. Got to be the dumbest guy in the room for a few years. Gain that kind of knowledge and kind of work with some McKinsey guys in their operations group and just got to really just be a sponge, right? And it was kind of at the back end of that where I got to work with management teams of founders all the time in the private equity setting. So more mid to late stage companies, but that was inspiring to me to see what was possible.
Well, I just think it makes us, we got to take our model of, recruiting the right people, the retention and the development, and we just have to do it better. We've got to make sure that anything that we tell young people in recruiting, that we deliver that and more so they don't want to leave. And so, the key to Wake Forest is that we've always been a developmental program. And we have to provide value in their lives in other ways so they don't want to leave here. And the nature of Wake Forest, this is a very competitive academic school. There's a lot of transfers that we would like to take here. The problem is they're at schools that we don't take their credits. Like the amount of players that are really good players that would be good fits. They got to lose a year of academic work to come here. So we've been very target specific of the schools that we look to get transfers from. So where has our grad transfers come from? Isaiah Wingfield came from Harvard. Donald Stewart came from Stanford. We have a player that just came from Villanova. And so really what you're trying to do is figure out, okay, what is the decision-making process of the player in the transfer portal? And if their initial process led them to a place like Stanford or Northwestern or Vanderbilt, then those are the guys that would resonate with our value system. So we are very unusual right now. There are schools that, because of the transfer portal, if they have 20 scholarships available, will only recruit 5 high school players, and the other 15 will come from other universities, because why take a 16 or 17-year-old and hope they're going to develop if you can already get a 21-year-old that's played college football? And so because a lot of these schools are taking less high school players, we're actually able to get better high school players because more of them are available. You know, right now we have like the 9th ranked recruiting class in the country for 24, not because we're recruiting differently, but just because other schools are passing on these guys because they're going to wait for portal players. So again, it's doubled down on our model of recruit, retain, develop, make sure that we're providing the players that we recruit everything we promised them we would do, and then look to supplement, not be dependent on the transfer model, but be very target specific with who we bring in. We're playing to the institution's strengths.
So is the transfer portal diminishing the spirit of servant leadership? Does it become less about the team and more about me?
Well, the combination of the transfer portal and what's called name, image, likeness, which is essentially pay for play, has certainly challenged our model. But we still have a phenomenal educational institution, and the value of a Wake Forest degree is still powerful. And so if a player comes here for 2 or 3 years and they're having competitive success, you know, they might be able to go somewhere for 1 year and get more cash, but what are they giving up? They're giving up a $450,000 Wake Forest degree to get what degree? And the only schools that would offer that same value of a degree, you know, aren't paying those 6 figures of money to get college players to transfer. And that's why if you recruit players on the front end that value what we are, hopefully they won't want to leave 2 or 3 years into their experience because of the initial reason they came here. And that's why we don't recruit players that don't value what we are academically. So again, that's part of our retention model. That's part of the reason that for the most part we've kept people. It's still a very, very powerful and meaningful degree. And when you have players like Brandon Chubb and Cam Serenay, and up here we have Claude Bragg and Cody Cater, and Key and Taylor, you know, most people their age don't see beyond the next week, let alone the next 40 years. And fortunately, most of our players see the next 40 years. And I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm just blown away by these two. Because I remember when they were 18 and 19-year-old knuckleheads. And I'm just blown away by their insights and their knowledge and how impressive they are. And, you know, we have 30 guys, 40 guys like that in our current team that if you have a job offer, I'm telling you, you could do very well hiring a Wake Forest football player. I've hired like 5 of them.
Yeah, thankfully, I went through my whole Wake Forest career without going into the training room, right? So I didn't know what an injury was or what that process was or how my mind would shift. And like I said, first practice of OTAs, year 2, tear my ACL, first time ever being hurt, first time ever having surgery. And I felt vulnerable. I felt, powerless. No matter how much I benched in the weight room or how much pound club I was in at Wake Forest, I felt like I couldn't do what my superpower was, which was to play football and use my athleticism and strength and mind. And so then I had to tap into something else and develop, mentally, what can I do that will never deteriorate, right, your mind, and how could I best position myself with the Wake Forest degree, with all these great alums that come out of this college, and really put that to play and then take advantage of that and exploit it. And so that was, I think, the light at the end of the tunnel moment for me was when I realized, what if I never come back from this injury? I don't know how my body does with, scars and surgery, and I never had that experience. So maybe if I don't come back, I need to figure out what else I can do. I remember rehabbing in Atlanta, staying at my parents' house. I would go to rehab at 7 a.m., be done at 9. And this is like 2 years out of college. And from 9 to I got sleepy, I didn't do anything. And that happened for like 2 months. And I realized if this is what life is without football, like, I got to change this, right? I'm calling friends. My friends are at their jobs. My friends, like, nobody can hang out with me. Like, it's not high school anymore. It's not college. So I was like, yo, I got to figure this out. And so that's when I really started picking up the phone. And you have the opportunity, you guys, as current players, that you can open doors for yourself because people want to talk to football players. People want to be able to say, guess who came to my job on my lunch break, right? So using that and taking advantage of that to really understand more about yourself, what you're interested in, get real world experience. Cam was just talking to one of you guys is the running back is interning at VQuip this summer. Real world experience, something that probably wouldn't be able to happen if he was just an average Joe that knocked on Cam's door or sent him a code email. So seeing those opportunities, I'm thankful that it happened because it woke me up early instead of waiting until year 4 and then not hearing a call from the NFL and being like, dang, I got to figure something out at 27 years old when I'm now competing with 22-year-olds. So being able to have that experience and opportunity and really find something and build from that.
Yeah, I think I've talked to you guys. Nothing about it's easy, right? For 23 years of your life, it's been your dream and your sole focus. And yeah, you had plan Bs, but are they really, you had plan A at the end of the day, right? And maybe that's the entrepreneurship mindset of just like, whatever, right? We're going to go for it. But I remember my shoes, I was a little undersized, maybe not quite fast enough, had a really good career, broke my foot, tore my calf in the process. And when the Panthers cut me and I was like sitting there, I was like, oh, well, someone's going to pick me up surely. And, the phone wasn't really ringing. You get to that point where you're like, okay, like, well, I'm sitting here and I feel like, well, what do I do? Like this was my life, right? But what really gave me that confidence and the, excitement was I realized all the things I loved about the game are still there in business, right? All those things that get you excited, like being a part of something, building, camaraderie with teammates, achieving goals, working hard, like structure, right? Those things are all still there in the world. You just got to flip the mindset and understand that it's just through a different vessel now. It's not football anymore.
Okay, I have plenty more questions. What would you say to, we have an exclusive group here. We have Division I, excellent college football players. But some of the things you just said, Cam, you don't have to be a football player to have those things. What advice would you all give to people that are not athletes that want to develop these capabilities?
Yeah, I think you can start developing it right in college. I wish I knew this stuff back when I was, and I'm not that old, right? But I still feel like if I was in college and I knew all this stuff that I know now, and I'm sure it'll continue to be like this the rest of my life, but if you can master the little things, right? There's very fundamentals to success that doesn't matter what you're doing, taking the harder routes, getting up early, doing the things the right way, having high integrity, work ethic. Those are all little things that you can work on every single day. Did you shortchange your assignment? Did you try to cut corners on things that you did in life? Like these are all things that I don't care what you're doing, it pays off in the end, right? So focusing on those things.
And one of my big principles that I love, and I think everybody, whether you're an athlete or not, is just put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. All the stuff goal-wise that you want to achieve comes through uncomfortable opportunities, right? So it's having those tough conversations with your friends and family that work with you. It's having those hard conversations with a coach that follows you from 3 different schools and saying it might be time. It's having those conversations of saying, hey guys, like I know we done it this way for 2-3 years, but we got to cut it out. We got to stop going out. We got to, focus, lock in, blah, blah, blah. So having those uncomfortable moments and really relishing in that, and really, you don't have to do it through athletics, but just really embracing it, because life is going to be uncomfortable. Life's going to be hard. To get to where you want to be, to really break through, you're going to have to do some uncomfortable things. So just really, really embracing that.
That's great stuff. We had a great keynote speaker yesterday that gave a talk on building a company and selling it to Pfizer. And he talked about the neuroscience space being like VCs were not funding it because these drugs took so long and there were just so many things that could derail these drugs. And he talked about this being a catastrophe situation in which he saw opportunity, right? So as a VC, Brandon, I'm curious, like there can be a herd mentality in the VC world where everyone's kind of backing the same companies. What do you look for in trying to find that golden nugget out there that maybe the rest of the world is missing?
Yeah, it starts with the founding team, right? The founder and what that person is, their intangibles. How are they? Do they have that mindset that takes you through accountability, discipline, being able to say no, being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and also are they a risk taker? I heard you speak on taking risks, right? Like paying $100 million for something that might not work is a huge risk, right? So taking risk is one of those big things as well, but is it calculated risk? And so we look for that. I think is the biggest thing is the actual human who's behind that company, who's going to get those 200 no's before they get that one yes, and be able to really just continue that grind and sacrifice and really put the company and everything that comes with that as a priority.
Great stuff. Vlad, in his talk yesterday, he talked about taking calculated risk, and we were talking a bit about it this morning, and he was saying about just, you have to do the analysis, but at some point you've got to act, right? And then when you do that, you gotta be willing to really bet big on yourself. Coach, you mentioned honing in on recruiting in a puddle, right? And honing in on those people that you really, really wanted. But I'm sure other people wanted them too. How do you go get them?
Well, again, it's very focused, concentrated efforts, and it's making those people feel like they are more important to you than any other school recruiting them. When we end up with our class, we don't offer 300 people to try to get 20. We may offer 40 to try to get 20. So for those 40 that we're recruiting, they're getting more mail, more phone calls, more personal attention than any other school. And that's the whole sell at Wake Forest. There's not another Power 5 school in the country that the average class size is 24 in a class, that has this liberal arts academic setting with all the advantages of a large professional school. And I just think at the end of the day, people take jobs or pick schools not because of buildings or names, but because of relationships. And if we're able to build relationships with people who share our value system, that's how you win recruiting battles. But it's also taking chances on players. Jesse Bates just signed a 4-year, $64 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. We were his only Power 5 offer. I mean, we literally beat the University of Toledo on him. Well, why? Jesse didn't do football year-round. He scored 18 points a game in basketball. He was a .430 hitter, center fielder in baseball. We didn't take him for where he was. We took him because we had a vision of where he could be. And as long as he had those personal characteristics of a work ethic, drive, intentionality, we believed he could get there. And, we've fortunately won that bet more than we've lost it. We don't bat 1,000%. That whole process, every year of taking that 12,000 to 20, and we've recruited players here, and all these guys know it, that they'll come to me a year later like, Coach, that dude there, what the hell were you guys thinking? It's not a perfect science. You're dealing with people who are always going to be fallible, and but there's an old saying that you bet on jockeys and not necessarily the horse. And I think if we believe in the personal characteristics of a person, we've been willing to go against the grain on those things because our research has told us it's a worthwhile bet.
You have a lot of conviction in your method.
Yeah, again, we have core values,
Yeah.
and win or lose, we haven't abandoned them. And I think the other thing for young entrepreneurs, those first 2 years when we were here and struggling, we always were presenting a vision of where we wanted it to be. Like, guys, this is the final vision. This is the final product. This is where we're going. These are the steps required to get there, and then rewarding them and recognizing when you do take those steps. And then, again, trying to enjoy the process. I don't care what you do. If you're only in it for the reward, you're not going to be successful at it. If you're a football player who only enjoys playing football games, there's only 12 of those a year.
Right.
If you don't enjoy the weight room, if you don't enjoy watching film, if you don't enjoy practicing, you're never going to become good at this. And so it's people who enjoy the process, and the words of the late Warren Zevon, right? Enjoy every sandwich.
That's great. That's great advice there. I have a last question for Brandon and for Cam, and then I'll have a last question for Coach. Brandon and Cam, if you could distill down all of your experiences with Coach Clawson, what's the one most powerful takeaway that you got from your experience from playing under Coach?
He's never changed, right? He was like that from day one when we were 3-9, or before we were even had a record, right? I remember Coach Clawson's first meeting, and I said this last year, but his first meeting with the team is, I came here to win the ACC championship. And I'm looking around for my 3 years of experience and looking at the room, and I'm like, that's a pipe dream, right? But now we're playing Pittsburgh in the ACC championship, and if they call a fake slide, we probably win the game, right? So we, just watching a leader like him and really understanding that he's been consistent, he stands by those core values, that vision, those principles, and whether we win 9 games, 10 games, or we win 3 games, he's the same Coach Clawson, and he's going to turn that switch and be that same person going into that next year. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is back against the wall, on a pedestal, winning Coach of the Year awards, or whatever it is, he's been the same person through in and throughout. And I think that's why guys like me and Cam come back to Wake Forest to make sure we could be on the panel with Coach Clawson. I think that's why his players are represented in this building right now, because they understand that and they see that as well. So
100%, yeah. And I think it's hard to distill to one thing. For me, like, Coach is still probably my number one person I look to for, like, how to build organization, run a company. Like, he's the mentor that, like, when I think back over my 5 years, it's a masterclass. It really is. And it's, he was just touching on the core values piece, right? As that is your kind of North Star for the organization, and it helps you make sure you maintain culture. It helps you hire. It helps you guide to how you focus the business, right? Everything you do can be centered around a strong set of core values, and that's something that he doesn't just say. It's actually being done every single day in the building, and something that now I've used to kind of maintain culture, do those same things. So definitely, if you want to see like a masterclass on how to be a CEO, he's right there. So
That's beautifully said. That's well said. And I guess if you're the other way, like if you say it and you don't do it, right?
Exactly. That's even worse.
That's the worst way to go. Coach, last question for you. It's going to be an either or. Either what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you, or just like, do you have any parting words for our aspiring entrepreneurs that are out there in the audience?
No, I mean, I think what I get the most from these guys when I listen to them talk, and I think what makes me the happiest, is how passionate they are about what they're doing. You can't fake that. And they were passionate football players, and that's why they were successful. I majored in political economy, and I graduated in the 80s at a time that everybody was going to Wall Street, and everybody was about making a number. What's your number? What's your number? And that never drove me, and I took a completely alternative career path because I was passionate about it. And that temptation to do something to try to make money or try to make a number, is very tempting, especially at a place like Wake Forest, that you're going to get great offers and have great opportunities. But if your values and your passion do not align with what you're doing professionally, it's hard getting up every morning. And I have a bunch of friends that are in venture capital and Wall Street and all that stuff, and all they talk about is hitting that number so they can retire. And I just shake my head and say, what a sad existence. I mean, it's, you know, do something you're passionate about and you never work a day in your life, and that is such a cliche. But I never, ever look at my bank account to decide if I still want to do this. I love what I do, and I'm just so proud that these guys, post-football, have found their passion, and that's why they're good at it. So I'm just extremely proud of both of these two guys, and you know, it's a blessing to work at Wake Forest and you know, coach guys of this caliber. So thanks.
Let's hear it. One big round of applause for the whole group. And specifically, Cam Serenier. Brandon Chubb. And our amazing head football coach, Dave Clawson. Thank you all so much for being here today.